Hi, I'm Curt Frye. In this video, I would like to show you how to count the number of rows and columns in a dataset. You can download my sample file, which is named Count Rows and Columns, using the link that I provide in the video description below. This workbook has two worksheets, and I'm on the first one, which is named Table, because working with an Excel table is actually fairly easy. All you need to do to count rows and columns is name the table and use the function that I will show you in a moment. So I have customer orders, and the name of the table I can find by clicking any cell in the table, clicking the Table Design contextual tab on the ribbon, and over on the left I see that the table name is orders. So I will use that in my formula. I'll click cell G3 next to number of rows, type equal, and to count the number of rows, just type rows, ROWS. So it returns the number of rows in a reference or an array, and then the table name is orders. So I can start typing, and orders appears in formula autocomplete. It's highlighted, so I'll press tab. You can see that the entire table has been highlighted as a reference. Right parentheses and enter, and I get the total number of rows of 16, which I can verify in this case because I have a sequential number starting at 1. So my index field, in this case order number, provides a unique value for every row in the table. If you don't have sequential numbers and you want to know how many rows you have in a data set, if you have an Excel table, you can just use the rows function that I just showed you, and you can see pretty much immediately how many rows you have in your data set. Same thing for columns. So I will stay in cell G4, which is currently highlighted, equal, then COLUMNS, returns the number of columns in an array or reference. Left parentheses orders, right parentheses and enter, and I get 4. And I have 1, 2, 3, and 4 columns of data. So those are correct. Working with a data range as opposed to an Excel table is a little trickier, but you can figure it out. So I'll go to the range worksheet. And here I have the same data set, except this time it is not in the form of an Excel table. You will also notice that I have number of rows and number of columns so that the results will appear above the actual table. And that will become important in a moment. So for this data set, I need to start in cell A5 because that is the first order that I have. I don't want to include the headers. And I also don't want to count anything that is outside of the data set. So let's do this incorrectly first, and then I will fix it, and then I will show you something to watch out for and why I have my summary formulas up here. So I'll click in cell F3, type equal, and then I will type rows, then a left parentheses, and let's assume that the data set can vary. In other words, we're bringing data in from outside, and I don't know how many order numbers there will be. So I need to include more rows and more columns so that the calculation will be accurate. So let's do it incorrectly first. I have equal rows, and the array will be A5, colon, and then let's say I30. So I'm looking at this larger data set, or this greater worksheet cell range, enter, and the number of rows is 26, which of course does not correspond to the actual number of orders that I have. Instead, it kept counting going down to row 30. So I can fix that a couple of ways, but the easiest way to do it is to add a dot operator to the right of the colon. So I will type a period or full stop or dot. And what this operator does is identify the last cell that contains data within this range. And what this operator does is identify the last cell that contains data. So in this case, that should be cell A20. So I have A20, and none of the other rows or other columns contain data either. So if I press enter, then I get a value of 16, which we know to be correct because this is the same data as before. And for the number of columns, I can type equal, columns, left parentheses, and the array is A5, colon, then a dot which again controls the range so that it only extends as far as the last cell that contains data. I30 should be I30, not 130. Right parentheses and enter, and we get 4 columns. There is something you have to watch out for, though, and that is if you have any data that occurs within the range that you're considering. So I'm actually going from A5 to I30. So if I were to enter a value in F9, and it can be anything, I'll just type the number 1 and enter, then the number of rows doesn't change, but the number of columns did. So I have these 4 columns, and then 5, and then 6. So you need to be careful when you're working with this data. And what I strongly recommend is that you have this data here on its own worksheet with nothing else around it, because you never know how far the data is going to go. So the definition might include an entire column or an entire row. So again, if I were to delete that, then I have the number of rows and the number of columns. I hope you found this tip to be useful. If you did, please like the video and subscribe to my channel.